I have never been more turned on by pajamas in my life. Hello everyone and welcome to Anime Club After Dark, the podcast that delves into all things anime, manga, and otaku culture related. I'm your host Alex, but you can call me Senpai, and joining me tonight I have our poser extraordinaire Nitai.
Who's ready for lollies and non-lollies and everything that's in between.
Nitai, you should know me by now. I'm always ready for lollies.
Literally starts the D&D campaign by shouting, where the lollies at?
Where them lollies at?
Oh my god.
But no, so Nitai and I have gotten together because he and I are going to be starting a multi-part Spoilercast series for an anime franchise that I think is near and dear to both of our hearts, and that is the Monogatari series.
This is going to be a long journey ahead of us.
It is, and we have essentially decided that, because previously we have done a spoiler cast, what was it, about 2.5, maybe even 3 years ago at this point.
It's been that long?
It's been a while. We did a spoiler cast for the entirety of the Monogatari franchise, and looking back on it, we thought that, we only spent like an hour and 20 minutes or so on that, and we didn't feel like we gave the entire franchise, enough of a shake.
It was to the point where we didn't even mention some characters, and then we got scolded
right?
for it.
So thinking about that, we've decided to go back, and we're going to do a spoiler cast series where we kind of denote each of the different parts of the Monogatari series into their own spoiler cast. So for this one in particular, we are going to be talking about only the stuff that happens in Bakemonogatari. So, and we've also decided that instead of going in chronological order, we will be doing these spoiler cast in broadcast order. So the way that the different parts of the Monogatari series originally came out.
In anime form, of course.
Yeah, in
because
anime
there is
form,
a bit of difference between the broadcast release of the anime and the book release of the light novels.
But yeah, for sure.
We're gonna go with broadcast order for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna go with broadcast order. Also, I do want to apologize. It is storming outside right now, so if you do hear thunder and lightning on my end, I'm very, very sorry about that. There's very little I can do.
Is it raining men though?
Not yet. I'm still waiting for the day it starts raining lollies. I will be in heaven then. Also, I do want to mention, so this is not, for Nitai and I both, this is not our first foray into the Monogatari series. We are rewatching this series as we go through the spoiler cast. I think it'll be that way all the way up to, at least for you, when we get to Zoku or Monogatari, because that's the only part you haven't actually sat down and watched for the first time yet.
Still haven't watched it for the first time. Waiting on my buddy to get caught to that point. But yeah, who knows? Maybe we will get there sooner than I assumed. But we'll see. Also, a thing to note: we won't be spoiling events from parts of the series that come later. Because we will maybe mention some stuff, but we won't go into detail.
Yeah, it's like this is a spoiler cast for Bakemonogatari. We will perhaps mention some things that are alluded to in Bakemonogatari that come up in later parts, but we won't really go into great detail or spoil those parts, those events from later parts.
Yep.
I think with that, we can go ahead and get on into Bakemonogatari. A great place to start would be our first experience with Monogatari as a whole, because this is the part where most people start their experience with Monogatari.
Yeah,
I guess I can go into this a little bit. I want to go into this a little bit first, because the Bakemonogatari originally came out in July of 2009. So it ran from July of 2009 to September of 2009, with the final 3 episodes being released as OVAs after that into 2010. I originally tried to watch Bakemonogatari, I think back in the beginning of 2010, where I watched the first couple episodes and got incredibly bored with it.
It's not an easy watch. It is not. It's
certainly not binge worthy either. It's hard. It's one of the hardest things ever to binge.
This show is so demanding of your attention and your focus, and it doesn't fuck around. You can try and binge it, but Man, it's quite draining in a good way, by the way. I mean, to clarify, both Alex and I love the show, but it is a really demanding watch.
It is. But yeah, when I originally watched it, I actually dropped it for a couple of episodes, and then after a few years, it was 2015. It was actually very shortly before we started this podcast. It had been going for a while. It had gotten its reputation. I thought, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to give this thing another shot. And I did. And at the time when I sat down and started watching this, that was when the first season of Monogatari was airing.
Oh, shit, really?
And over the course of, I think, 3.5 weeks, I actually binged the entire Monogatari series and then got to the point where I was waiting week to week for Owari Season 1. That's how much I fell in love with it. Like, I don't know what it was the first time I watched it. I just couldn't get into this. Maybe it was just because of my mindset. Like, I was a bit younger. I had just started college, and then by the time I sat down and watched it for the second time, I had graduated from college and was in the working world. I don't know. Maybe something about my mindset changed.
It's kind of a challenging show because it doesn't hold you by the hand. It leaves a lot of things for you to like figure out and piece together. And it's just, and I mean, we'll get to the dialogue, but the dialogue in this show is sharp, is witty, but it's rapid as fuck. It does not let up at all. It goes and goes and goes and goes on tangents, and it can get quite hard to keep up with sometimes.
Well, as we've said, Bakemonogatari and the Monogatari series as a whole is based on a light novel series written by the very, very talented Nisio Isin.
The infamous Nisio Isin.
Infamous. It is the entire Monogatari series, at least up to this point, including Bakemonogatari, has been produced by Studio Shaft. The entire production, like the entire project, has been like generally directed by Akiyuki Shimbo. But over the course of its run, other directors have come in sporadically. With Bakemonogatari in particular, they also brought on Tatsuya Oishi to sort of co-direct with Akiyuki Shimbo. The character designs were done by Akio Watanabe. The character designs are more or less lifted from the light novel illustrations.
Done by Vofan, the goat.
Done by the absolutely great Vofan. The music in the Monogatari series, well, there's been some other pieces of music, but principally the music in the Monogatari series has been composed by Satoru Kosaki, also a goat. I'm sure we'll get to it throughout these series of Spoilercast, just the very memorable pieces of music that come about throughout the run of it.
Yeah.
As I said, it aired from July 2009. Bakemonogatari aired from July of 2009 to September of 2009. The final 3 episodes were released as ONAs. I do want to talk about that, though, because currently, the only way you can watch all 15 total episodes of Bakemonogatari legally is one of 2 ways. Either owning the Blu-rays, which the final 3 episodes are on there, or by pirating it, because for some reason, and I cannot fathom why, both Crunchyroll and Funimation have not licensed the ONAs.
Can we also talk about that? I don't know if on Funimation it's the same, but that on Crunchyroll at least, for some reason, the first 12 episodes are like 480p.
Yeah, they're only available in 480p. That's the highest resolution you can watch them in.
Why? Why didn't they never updated it for some reason?
I don't know, because they weren't even released in 480p. They were released in 720.
I'll never forget how confusing it was for me to I can't remember what caused it. I think maybe it's because of you guys, because by the time I joined the podcast, all of you were like just gushing over Monogatari. But then I was like, yeah, I guess I'll check this show out. Go to Crunchyroll. It's 480p for no reason. I'm like, it's time to put me cap on, lads. Time to sail the seas.
Oh, for me personally, I actually own the Blu-rays, so that's how I watch them. But yeah, it's a weird quirk of this series that for some reason, all the places that have licensed the Monogatari series have never licensed these ONAs. I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure Crunchyroll also hasn't licensed Kizu Monogatari yet either.
They haven't, but they have licensed some of the later parts that are OVAs, like Neko Monogatari Black, and I think Tsuki Monogatari.
Yes,
They
Tsuki
have
Monogatari
licensed
was an OVA
OVAs.
series.
Yeah, and it is on Crunchyroll in 1080p, so it's like,
Like, I don't understand that. It must be a licensing thing. It's got to be, but anyway, that's so far beyond my pay grade. So the ED for Bakemonogatari remains the same throughout the entire run of it. It is Kimi no Shiranai Monogatari by Supercell.
probably my favorite ED of the entire
It's
series.
certainly one of my favorites. It's up there. And then probably the last little bit of technical stuff to get into is the art and animation of Monogatari as a whole, but you definitely, with Bakemonogatari being your introduction to it, it definitely stands out. I know this is kind of cliche to say this at this point because everyone says this about Monogatari, but the only phrase I can think of to adequately describe the art style and animation is avant-garde.
Yeah, I took the words out of my mouth. Pretty much. It's very, very avant-garde.
Everyone says that about the Monogatari series, so it seems so cliche to say, but it is really the best and only way I can describe it, the art and animation of this series.
So many different like ways of animation that they like use in the show. Sometimes it's like these sort of like sometimes it's like live photography even. You'll see like fucking real life photos like used in the show. Sometimes it's kind of regular animation. Sometimes it's just something entirely different. It's really something.
It is. I mean, and there's lots of quick cuts. There are fades to
the directing is so good.
And there's fades. There's fades to these animation cells that are literally just blocks of text. And some of them go by incredibly quick. And there's 17 lines of text on there, and it's only on screen for a second. So that's something crazy.
It's sort of like, it's interesting because there are a lot of times where there isn't a whole lot of animation going on in the show. Sometimes it could get very, as I said, just not really animation, like it doesn't animate that much in certain scenes, but they compensate for that with, again, really wonderful directing and just really cool visuals and weird visuals, It's really cool. It's really something unique, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and there's other things that the series as a whole has become known for. The head tilts, I think, is a big one. It almost seems like a meme at this point to have the Monogatari head tilts, which is also, well, at least at the time this was being made, bled over into other things that Shaft was making. It certainly bled over into Madoka Magica.
Yeah.
Which I actually attribute more to Akiyuki Shimbo than Shaft as a whole.
I think obviously he sort of led Bakemonogatari, but I think he really left a mark on the entire show because for the rest of the series, it's like he set the tone when it comes to the style and the direction that the show will has, and so it's very much Shinbo has his fingerprints all over the show.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and something else is like the setting of this show, right? It's portrayed as like this bustling metropolis, but yet you look at all the background art and there's nobody there.
Yeah, it's really interesting how there are no, sometimes you'll see cars going by and sometimes there will be...
And they all look exactly the same, by the way.
They all look exactly the same, and sometimes there will be references to other people in a certain scene later on. I mean, there are some examples, but it's like the show doesn't really care about anything else besides the main cast of characters that it's delving into.
Yeah, I've always also taken that as a symbology because the fact that the town seems empty, even though you're kind of led to believe that it's like an actual thriving town, is that it's supposed to symbolize loneliness, like teenage loneliness.
Okay, I guess.
And then the thing with all the cars being the same, and there's other stuff in the backgrounds too that just seems like it's a lot of stuff repeated over and over again. Can be how as a teenager sometimes you feel like life is a bunch of monotony and sameness. I've always felt that some kind of symbolism there.
Yeah, I can get behind that take. I just really love how the town looks. For some reason, even though we say it's empty, there's something really striking about how they portray the town, the city itself. And I can't put my finger on it. It's just, there's something about it, you know? It feels like sort of otherworldly, even, in some cases.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It definitely feels like it's taking place in some kind of like alternate reality or something. But anyway, should we actually get into the story? The meat.
Let's talk about the actual show, yeah.
All right, so we're going to go through this in like story arc order. So the Bakemonogatari starts out with the 2-episode story arc Itagi Crab.
Yes.
And something else that's somewhat unique about the Monogatari series, other anime since have also kind of taken this route as well when there are multiple story arcs. Each story arc has its own OP.
And each OP is sang by the main heroine of that arc.
Yes, at least for Bakemonogatari.
Yeah.
And in Hitagi Crab, the OP is stable. I always read that backwards so many times.
Yeah,
Staple. By Chiwa Saito, who is the VA for Hitagi Senjogahara, who we are principally introduced to in these first 2 episodes. There's other characters who were also introduced. Obviously, the main character of Koyomi Araragi. We have Tsubasa Hanakawa, Memo Ishino, and Shinobu.
But aside, like, speaking of introductions, what a bold introduction to a show, right? Because imagine you're sitting there watching this show for the first time, and then it just hits you with this montage of events where you have no clue what's going on. You see all of these like quick cuts and really like striking animation and weird characters going on, and like there's blood everywhere, and then there's this blonde for some reason, and she has these big ass teeth, and it's really striking and bold, and it's I love it.
It's not the only big thing that blonde's got, by the way.
Oh, we'll get to that later, buddy.
But yeah, like the first like what 90 120 seconds of the show is just quick cuts that obviously, knowing what comes forward, they're alluding to events that are going to be described in Kizumonogatari.
But for the entirety of Bake, you have no clue what is that even about.
That's and then there's other times, especially later, I believe it's in the final story arc, Tsubasa Cat, where other quick cuts from that same thing are shown. So it's brought
even
up
to
again,
a different event, yeah.
Yeah, and it leaves you wondering, like, it already sets up the mystery, like, what is this shit, like, am I going to be explaining this?
Nope.
And then it immediately cuts once that like flashback or whatever you want to call it ends. It immediately cuts to Koyomi running up the stairs and catching Hitagi falling on the staircase, and you're like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, and I love how sort of it's like when I sat down and rewatched it, the first thing that popped into my head while watching that was like, man, so fucking. Like, I love how confident the show is in itself in, like, just presenting this, like, weird story like that. It's like, boom, this thing happened, boom, this thing happened, all this shit's going on. And then it goes through all the female characters that we're gonna meet in the show, and it's like, you see all of the girls with each of their, like, the name of their apparition, basically. And it's like, boom, Bakemonogatari, here we go, motherfucker, let's go. And it's like, it's so great. And that goes for the rest of the show, because they're, especially in the first episode, they throw a lot of information at you that they will not explain in this season. Like, yeah. Like when there's a conversation that Koyomi is talking about how, yeah, he was a half vampire for some reason, and they never explain why and how, and it's interesting. It's very interesting to go about like that when it's like your first introduction to a story, right?
They never, well, I won't say they never, but there are multiple instances that they keep referring to over and over throughout Bakemonogatari that, well, one of them is kind of explained by the end of it, but the other one isn't really explained until Kizumonogatari, but they keep referencing Spring Break and Golden Week. Yeah. And, like, at the end of it, you know what happened during Golden Week. At the end of Bakemonogatari, you know what happened.
But Spring Break? No.
What happened during Spring Break? You gotta wait and see Kizu to find out.
It's really interesting. I haven't read I only read Kizumonogatari, the novel, but have you read Bakemonogatari?
I have. I've read well, I've read almost all the novels. I'm actually currently reading the Monster Season novels.
Nice. And does Bake also, is the novel also written like that, where they just throw some of these, like, this information? It's like, yeah, we're not going to explain it.
Yes, it is.
Interesting. Because, again, like, another example of that, I mean, I'm jumping ahead, but, like, I'll stop right there. Just a real quick example is, later on, Hitagi and Koyomi are going to see Oshino Meme. And when they arrive, they see Shinobu, and Seiji Okahara is like, quick question, what the fuck is that? And Araki is like, pretty much, I'm not gonna, like, don't think about it. He's like, it's not gonna try and explain it.
It's like he's literally hand waving it in front of Hitagi. It's like, pay no attention to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the crazy shit you get with this, and like you say, what a fantastic introduction, and like the character introductions in Bakemonogatari in particular are crazy. Like the only character introduction I can think of that isn't like off the walls kind of crazy is Hanekawa's introduction, because like that's her just talking to Koyomi like after school.
They're just
and,
talking about the festival, yeah.
Yeah, that seems so normal in comparison to how the other characters are introduced later on. Like, even with Hitagi, right? Later in the same episode, in fact, right after that conversation, she's introduced by trying to fucking kill Koyomi. She puts a fucking stapler in his mouth and a box cutter.
What a great imagery, though, like her falling from the stairs, and like it's funny because when you see it for the first time, she's falling from the sky, and it's like it's really dramatic, and Koyomi is reaching out for her and grabbing her and saving her. But then later on, it's like, oh yeah, she just slipped from a banana. It's like, what the fuck?
I even like her line, like, who would have guessed there would be a banana peel up there?
Wasn't there a later on in the show? I think he told Hanekawa, he's like, don't ever eat bananas in school.
Yeah, don't ever eat bananas in school. But yeah, like that introduction is crazy. And then like part of the thing when Koyomi catches her on the stairs, he realizes that how light she is. Like she only weighs like 5 kilograms, and she should weigh something like 45 kilograms or something like that.
And then it sets up like the whole premise of this entire first arc. It's like he meets her for pretty much for the first time. It's like something's off about her.
Yeah, and that's why he takes her to meet Meme Oshino, and like that's also something else. That introduction, like it's very clear from the second you see him that he and Koyomi have some kind of history together, that they've had some kind of an issue, or done something together before. And I also think it's funny that when he introduces him to Meme, like, oh, another girl, you're getting quite popular. Did something good happen?
The dialogue in this fucking show is so good. And
it's so many people, so many characters have like their own catchphrase. Like with Hanekawa, it's I don't know everything, I just know what I know.
Such a good catchphrase.
With Hitagi's is the only one that kind of changes. Like at the beginning, it's like tsundere service.
We'll talk about the dialogue a lot in this episode because there is so much to talk about. I love how like there are fights in Monogatari as a whole, but I think the more like not only fights in terms of like punching each other, but it's more like sort of like witty dialogue back and forth between the characters, because it always feels between Hitagi and Araragi like they're trying to win a conversation between the both of them. It's always by the end, Senju Kahara always wins by the end, because of course she does. But I love their back and forth. Their conversations are so entertaining because you have Araragi, who is sort of the straight man, and then you got Senju Kahara, who is like always deadpan, like all the time, and it's so funny. Like
yeah,
it's
for
great.
Sure. But then like that whole thing with Oshino, where they meet and he takes away like the curse on her.
The one thing that he says when they meet him and talk to him about her problem, that apparently she has an apparition that caused her to lose all of her weight.
I love this line because it sets up so much for what comes afterwards, because Meme says, no one can save you, you can only save yourself. And this is a thing, this is a theme, this is a running thing that goes through the Monogatari series. It will come up again and again and again. And it will come, I guarantee you, if you stick with this, it will come full circle by the time you get to the second season of Owari Monogatari.
Yeah, it's not by accident that the first episode of the show, it literally just spells out like this motif of you can only save yourself. Because that's what these characters do to some extent. Like, so the whole thing with Itagi, her problem is, again, she doesn't have any weight. And that happened because she, like, her past is, like, super dark. Like, her mother got into this cult, and that caused a rift in her family and quite an extreme, because it led to one of the cult members, like, arriving at their home and assaulting Itagi.
Yeah, he tried to rape her.
Yeah, which is like, it's like, oh, God. And the way she sort of, like, managed to deal with all of that trauma is, like, when she met this, like, apparition, this ghost, because this world has spirits and ghosts. I mean, our main character is half a vampire. She sort of asked it to take her weight off of her, the weight of her trauma. And then she sort of lives with that for a long time, and that causes her to be so distant and paranoid and, like, you know, put up this guard, which leads her to fucking almost killing Koyomi with a stapler.
Yeah, and that's also something else that comes up multiple times throughout the Monogatari series, is this like this wordplay, right? So like Hitagi asked the weight crab to take the weight of all this stress and all this baggage that she had with her family off of her shoulders, and instead the crab takes away her actual physical weight.
Yeah, it's sort of a careful what you wish for in some of these cases, which is very interesting. But I kind of love it, because it, like, and what I love about, like, it's like, you kind of think to yourself, oh, she doesn't have any weight, okay, but I love how they portray that, because one of the best scenes of the entire season is when Araragi is at Hitagi's place after Oshino tells them to go back to her place. She needs to, what did he say? Like, she needs to, like, clean herself up or whatever, sort of be pure when she arrives at the, like, ritual that they will perform, right?
Yeah.
So they have this entire conversation, and she's walking out of the shower and she's butt naked. It's like, oh, what the fuck is wrong with you? And she's, you know, she's teasing him and all of that. But then by the end of the scene, she's like, it's like, clothes are heavy for me, you know, which maybe Nisio is using as an excuse to just portray a teenager butt naked for, you know, fan service. I mean, he is very self-indulgent, yeah, but I love how it's sort of written to the character and to the story and makes sense. There's a lot that was said about the fan service in Monogatari, and there is a lot of it for sure, but I do think it's fan service that is crucial to the show to some extent.
Yeah, it's not just fan service for fan service sake. Like, it's actually serving a point most of the time. When we get to Nise Monogatari, I listen. I've never looked at toothbrushes the same since.
But this thing in particular doesn't work without Hitagi being almost naked all the time. And it's portrayed in I gushed about the direction of the show, but it's been said many times, but this scene in particular is a great example of that, because for the beginning of the scene, so, you know, you're looking at Itagi and you're not missing anything at all. Like, you see all of it, because
you're seeing sort of, I mean you're not seeing nipples or anything, but you're definitely seeing tits and ass. Yeah,
you're seeing tits and ass for sure. And Araki is, you know, just is looking at it, obviously. But the moment that Itagi is like, clothes are heavy for me, it's like a switch. It's suddenly like the camera isn't quote unquote lusting after her. It's very much respectful of her.
Yeah, because it's showing you how heavy the clothes are for her.
Yeah. And it's mwah. I love it. I love it.
But then, at the end of this arc, obviously, the weight crab is sort of lifted off of Hitagi. I find it funny that the crab actually adds the weight to Koyomi at the end. Where he steps on the scale and it says like 100 kilograms, and he's like, son of a bitch.
Motherfucker.
But yeah, that's kind of how it ends, and we're left off thinking that now Hitagi and Koyomi are actually like a thing.
She claims he is her friend, which
Yeah.
again,
And
by the beginning of at the beginning of the arc, she doesn't talk to anyone. She's alone. Like Hanekawa even mentions that no one's like she is by herself all the time. She almost never comes to school because of her sickness. And but then by the end of the arc, she's like she's smiling, she's happy, and like she's thanking Koyomi. She's like, "Yeah, I'd like to be your friend," and it's great. It's cute.
Yeah. And then we get to Mayoi Snail, the next 3 episodes in the in Bakemonogatari, and we are introduced to best loli Mayoi Hachikuji.
Oh my god. And what an OP she has.
Yes, and what an OP she has.
Blasting at you.
Just absolutely blasting this, like, lollipop at you. Jesus Christ. But no, I definitely want to talk about her character design, though, because, like, it's called Mayoi Snail. It's like, there's all that play on words with Lost Cow versus Lost Snail. But she actually kind of looks like a snail with her giant backpack.
Sometimes they draw her shadow like a snail, and I love it.
Yeah, I know. I love that too.
By the way, all of the character designs are top notch. They're like 10 out of 10.
Yes,
in Monogatari. I love it.
For sure.
But Hachikuji doesn't even show up for most of the first episode of her arc.
For most of the first episode in her own arc, she doesn't even show up. What the first episode of this arc is one of my favorite episodes ever of all time in anime, because it's literally like a 23-minute long conversation with 2 people bullshitting each other, and it's the most compelling shit I've ever seen.
Damn, like, I can watch. I can watch Itagi and Koyomi talking shit all day. It's so entertaining. It's so fun. You know,
it's like their witty back and forths with each other are so good. Like a part of this conversation is literally Hitagi talking about how different kanji are made up of like different words. Like, I know there's a lot of stuff that's talked about. Like, I don't speak Japanese. I really wish I could. I wish I could go.
A lot of that goes over our heads for sure.
Yeah, I wish I could really dive deep into all the different cultural references they're talking about with how kanji are created, but I can't. I'm not anywhere near qualified to do it. But it's so compelling as hell to just hear them talk about it. They're talking about how like Hitagi's name can be like read as something like public works or something like that, and I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. It's also like we talked about. Alex and I talk about this show all the time. It's because there's so much to talk about. I mean, heck, it's been like 30 minutes and we only talked about one arc. Just so you like.
Sorry,
it's crazy.
John.
Yeah, sorry, John. But like one of my favorite lines, because it's such a like a quintessential Nisio Isin line, I guess. Oh, I need to. Hold on. It's such a Nisio Isin line. What was that about her clothes?
You'll need to be more specific.
It was, remember when she approaches Koyomi and she's like,
yes.
When she's like talking about her new dress.
Yeah, she's wearing a completely new outfit we've never seen her in.
Yeah, and she's like, by the way, all the outfits in the show is perfect. But anyway, she's like, oh, I haven't bought this dress to show you. I bought it for it to be seen by you, or something like that.
So the line is, I didn't buy this dress for you. I bought this new dress so you could be the first one to see me in it.
Yeah, and it's such a like. It's so necessary to be able to be like look for these nuances in language and in just conversations. It's great.
Yeah. But when Hachikuji actually does show up after this epic conversation with 2 masterclass bullshitters has ended, I think that it gets really interesting because you're introduced to her, and there's so much foreshadowing because Koyomi is the first one to see her, right? And he points her out. And he actually saw her before Hitagi showed up, but then she just left. She didn't say anything. She's just looking at some kind of map that's nearby, and then she left. But then she comes back, and she's still looking at the map, and Hitagi points her out, and he's like, what's that little girl doing over there? What's that, like, middle school elementary school girl doing over there?
It's Aragi pointing her out, and he's like...
That's right. Did I say like, Hitagi?
Yeah.
I meant Koyomi. I'm sorry.
And I love how it's like, because on a rewatch, this arc is really satisfying in that aspect, because it's like Aragi is like looking at a Hachikuji and he's trying to read her name on her backpack, and it's like, what's that over there? And Hitagi is like, it's what did she say? Something along the lines of, it's very hard to see.
Yeah, it's very hard to see, and you're like, oh, so she just has some bad, she's not very
she's
far
far away. You can't see. It's like, okay. But then, like, as the arc goes on, you don't see any interactions between Senjogahara and Hachikuji for some reason.
The only like direct interactions you're seeing with Hachikuji are between herself and Koyomi, and
Hanekawa for an instance, which does throw you for a loop.
And Hanekawa to throw you for a loop. She does show up, and there's some great foreshadowing there to what's going on with Hanekawa's family situation.
Yeah, it's so good.
Because this arc takes place all in one day. It takes place on Mother's Day. And Hanekawa basically says that she doesn't like to be home on holidays. And it's kind of left at that, and you're kind of just like, okay, that's kind of weird, but, whatever.
But the question is, why? Why do they see Hachikuji? Why is that?
That's a really great question that will get answered eventually, I'm sure. But the whole thing with Hachikuji is that she's lost and she's trying to get home to her mother's on Mother's Day. And so Koyomi decides to help her out, and Itagi just comes along. Turns out they get lost on the way there in a neighborhood that Itagi is supposed to actually know. So then it like brings up a lot of questions, like what the fuck is going on? Like something's obviously up. So they go back to the park. Koyomi and Hachikuji stay there, and Itagi goes to
and talk shit.
Yeah, and then they talk shit as well. And he gropes her. For the first of many times, Koyomi gropes Hachikuji. And Itagi goes off to Meme to find out what the fuck is going on. And like you say, that's when Hanekawa shows up. He can see her and everything. And then she gets back, Itagi gets back, and tells Koyomi what Meme said, and then also reveals to Koyomi that she can't actually see Hachikuji.
Whoops! I love that great cut of like it's like we're watching from Hitagi's point of view of just Araragi in the distance talking to himself, and then like for some reason throwing things in the air and like for some reason fighting the air itself. It's great.
Yeah, and then they had that great moment. It's like, listen, don't ever lie to me again, bitch.
Also, we got a confession in that episode, I think.
Yes.
When Senjugai is like, "I love you,"
and she says it in clear English, "I love you."
It's like it's just tugging on my heartstrings.
Also, the twist at the end though with Hachikuji is also really good, I thought. Especially like, or not so to twist, the reveal rather of why she's lost. It's kind of like sweet in a way, because Hachikuji came from a broken home. Their parents got a very bitter divorce. And she was actually one day going off to see her mother, and she got hit and killed by a car trying to cross the road on the way to her mother's house. And the twist or reveal is that Hachikuji's actually a ghost. She's dead, and she's just trying to get back home so that she can essentially pass on.
Yeah.
And become she ends up becoming a wandering oddity instead of a lost oddity, or they use a different term, but that's basically what happens, where she can actually wander around without being lost.
Yeah, I love this whole thing with her character. Like, besides enjoying her conversations with Araragi, which are like a lot of fun, and they will keep on being a lot of fun for the rest of the show. I love that concept of she causes people to get lost because they want to be lost. Because the beginning of this arc is Araragi leaving his home, even though it's Mother's Day, and his sister Karen, which both of his sisters are sort of introduced for the first time in this arc, they're like mad at him. So his want to be lost sort of leads him to meet Hachikuji and keep on getting lost, and that's, as said, the same goes for Hanekawa, who was looking to be lost to some extent. There's something about that want of being lost that for some reason is super compelling to me. I can't put my finger on why.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of people can relate to this idea of just like being so overwhelmed by everything that you just want to disappear for a few hours.
Yeah.
And get lost.
Yeah.
I will say, going back to what you said, I'll bring it up again. That line, "No one can save you. You can only save yourself."
Yeah, it's great. Also, by the end of this arc, Aragi and Sejuga are going out officially,
Yes,
which is that continuing thread of their relationship throughout the season is really satisfying to watch how they
throughout
grow.
the series, really.
For sure, definitely.
But shall we move on to the next arc?
Yes, let's do that. So let's talk about some lesbian monkeys.
Yes, let's talk about a lesbian monkey. So the next arc is Suruga Monkey. It's episode 6 through 8. The OP is Ambivalent World by Miyuki Sawashiro, who is Kambaru's voice actor.
Yeah.
Suruga Kambaru is introduced for the first time in this arc. So
she's right in your face. Kanbaru. It's
about a lot of things.
About a lot of things.
The fact that she's into yaoi. Do you mind if I
get naked?
The fact that she's into yaoi, she loves showing off her body.
I mean, I can't blame her.
The fact she just basically says straight up, "Yeah, I like eating pussy."
She should eat meat, eh?
Yeah, eat more meat. That's gonna come up later.
Anyway.
I love that scene later on. Yeah, like she's got this really energetic personality, and apparently she loves to read because her house is full of books.
I love like how this arc starts, and again, like Nisa is so good at that, like pointing you gently, like taking you on a ride, for like, and you feel like you're going in through like a scene or whatever, and then without you even realizing it, he sets up the entire arc. Like, I love how the first episode of this arc, for instance, it starts out with Aragi talking about like how Itagi is tutoring him, and then it goes on to him like being with her at her place and them studying together. It's all great. And we've seen Kanbaru. They talked about her. We got the sense of her character. It's like, okay, nothing really too exciting so far. And then by the end of the episode, he goes back home and he gets absolutely just smashed by that fucking devil, whatever that is.
The
without
rainy
even
devil,
realizing
yeah.
it. Rainy devil.
That's the oddity that has control of Suruga Kambaru, is the rainy devil. And I like how everyone keeps referring to it as a monkey's paw because it literally turns like her left arm into a monkey arm. Is it her left arm or her right arm? I can't remember.
It's her left arm. And they literally, she thinks it's a monkey, like the monkey's paw, because like her mother, for some reason, inherited her this like artifact that looks like a monkey's paw. And she wishes, she wishes for some things, and then it grants her, but in a very twisted way.
Taking Bakemonogatari like by itself, like that does seem really random. We find out later why she was gifted this.
Her mother in particular is a character we almost never see her, but from time to time she just her presence is talked about in.
Yeah, she's talked about a lot, but she's very rarely actually seen. In fact, I think she's only ever been seen one time, like in the flesh.
Once, yeah.
And that's in a flashback, if I recall.
We heard from her in a flashback. We see her, I think, only for like a quick scene, and that's it. Very later on.
But yeah, we're definitely going to talk about her because like her mom becomes somewhat of a plot point later on in the Monogatari series.
Kanbaru in particular has connections that we are not aware of yet, but are going to be interesting to talk about later. I
see when we get to Nise and particularly second season, I have theories. I will point out.
We'll get there soon.
But yeah, the first fight with the Rainy Devil with Kambaru, fucking phenomenal animation, that fight scene.
Yeah.
Actually, totally. the second fight also has really good animation as well.
And it's brutal. Like, Monogatari is brutal as fuck when it wants to be. It's
also, can we talk about the Itagi service?
Oh, the Itagi service. It's
I like how in that first the first fight with the Rainy Devil, like Hitagi shows up and Koyomi's laying. He's been fucked over, like he's been beat the fuck out by the
and
Rainy
she just
Devil.
like and she just abusing him like which is like, how could you forget, because the whole thing is she was supposed to give him money to give to Oshino for how he helped her with her apparition problems. And she's showing up there. He's just almost dead, and she's scolded him for forgetting that, like taking the money. And then what does she do?
Yeah, it just shows up and it's like, hey, have a fucking panty shot. Nice. Never change, Itagi.
Never change, Itagi.
But yeah, that second fight where Koyomi and the Rainy Devil are fighting again. Like, that whole reveal at the end of how they sort of solve the whole thing. So, as we mentioned, Kambaru is a lesbian. And she has the hots for Hitagi. Well, she had the hots for Hitagi, but then she realized, probably, that Hitagi wasn't into women. And that she could never actually have Hitagi.
I mean, we don't know what is Itagi into, but keep on going, yeah.
But another thing is she was always athletic, sort of a tomboyish character. And she just wanted to do well in sports, and that's one of the things she preyed on the quote unquote monkey's paw for, was to get better. And the reason it got better, or she got better at it, was because the monkey's paw was actually going out and attacking her competition, like literally, and making sure they couldn't compete.
Yeah. And then like and it's the same, it's that thing of careful what you wish for again. And that all escalates to the point where she has this falling out with Itagi, because Itagi also was sick and all that happened. But then she thought she sort of let go of that sort of unrequited love. But then she see her with Araragi, and it sort of breaks her for a bit, you know. And she did she explicitly wish that, like, to kill Araragi, or was it like something
I think
else?
It was more of a unconscious thing. Like, she just wanted to stop what was being in her way. And what was in her way was Koyomi.
Yep.
But then I think when she realized, especially when Hitagi showed up, and realized that if I kill Koyomi, Hitagi's gonna fucking kill me. And then I'll never get what I want.
Yeah, and she'll never forgive her.
And she'll never forgive me.
Yeah, and she realizes that, like, it's not gonna, like, she realizes it's not gonna happen. She's not getting together with Hitagi. And I love that conversation between Senjogara and Kanbaru in that instance, where, like, again, Kanbaru just beats the shit out of Araragi. Great fight. I love the animation. It's so raw. It's awesome. And then by the end of it, Hitagi shows up because, of course, the GOAT Oshino called her, because he knew that's the only way to stop it. And the moment she enters, Kanbaru just, like, snaps.
Stops.
She's like,
in her tracks.
She stops,
like,
yeah.
just stops.
Just stops. Because
and there's that, like, oh shit realization, like, if I go through with this, I'm never actually going to get what I want.
This person will hate me forever.
Yeah. And, like, she has that sort of realization that, well, if I can't have Hitagi as a lover, maybe I can have her as a friend.
Yeah. And it's a great scene. I love that scene.
I also feel like that's something a lot of people can relate to as well. Like, there's probably a lot of people out there that can relate to, like, really wanting to be in a romantic relationship with someone that you can't be in one with.
And it's rough. It is rough. I mean... And again, they're high schoolers, so of course it's like it's their entire world, you know.
Of course.
Of course.
I too was in high school once. It was many years ago, but I was there. I kind of remember it. It may have been the Cretaceous period, but I do remember it.
It's a great arc. I really like this arc a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you said,
I even like that when they're talking, when Hitagi and Kanbaru are talking, like even though Kanbaru knows what the answer is, she still asks the question. She's like, how did she phrase it? I can't remember the exact words, but she's looking, like, right into Hitagi's eyes and says, "I love you," and Hitagi's like, "I'm sorry, I don't like girls."
And also, she's with Araragi, so it's not gonna happen. And it's a great arc. But what comes after it is a bit.
Okay, so the next arc.
Let's talk about that.
Bakemonogatari is Nadeko Snake. Obviously, Sengoku Nadeko is introduced. Also has the OP, one of the most iconic OPs in the history of anime, Renai Circulation,
one of the most
sung by
memeable openings.
Yes. You die!
Sung by Alex Jones, obviously.
Yes, sung by Alex Jones. But no, Renai Circulation, sung by the incredibly talented and absolutely lovely Kana Hanazawa.
Our goddess.
I don't know why it didn't click with me before. Like, Renai Circulation is an iconic OP. It's referenced so many times throughout, all kinds of anime commentary.
Such a bop, dude.
But it's only ever seen twice. Like, it's only ever in 2 episodes, because Nadeko Snake is a 2-episode long story arc. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, there have been ReZero OPs that we've seen more than this.
Yeah, it's kind of insane that such a impactful opening was there for such a little time. It's kind of insane, but it's a great opening. I love it.
Maybe it's really true. Absence does make the heart grow fonder.
Maybe it's like all the rest of the openings. It represents Nadeko so well. It's it's sugary, like you say, it's poppy. It is. But like you say, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this arc. Like, yeah, it's only 2 episodes, exactly like the Hitagi Crab arc, but there's a lot less going on in this arc. It almost seems to me, and I'm curious to see what you think about this too. It almost seems to me like this was inserted. I mean, obviously it's in the light novel as well, but it seems like this entire arc is really just inserted as a roundabout way to introduce Nadeko for more stuff down the road, and really nothing else. So that's the thing. I mean, Nishiori is really good at throwing fucking foreshadowings and red herrings all over the place. Like, upon rewatch, you just pick up on so many things that you're like, whoa, really? Wait, what the fuck? Really? They talk about that early on? Really? Huh? And some of it is, I'm sure, is set up like, is like, he planned it out. But some of the things that happen, I don't know if it's just he actually did plan them out, or he built upon stuff that he wrote before, whether they were like good or not, but just like built upon that to create something even greater. One of these instances is for sure Nadeko Snake, because this arc is not remarkable at all. There's nothing...
Yeah. Well, except for its OP.
Except for its OP, yeah, for sure. But there's nothing really fascinating about it,
I have a theory about this. I really have a theory about this. I don't know if it's true or not, and I know Nisio Isen's a great writer. There's no doubting that. He's one of the greatest. He's one of the greatest writers in Japan right now. He's up there with Gen Urobuchi in terms of his writing talent.
Totally.
I have a feeling that he actually conceptualized a lot of the stuff for Nadeko that came after this, like the stuff in second season that we'll get to. I feel like he conceptualized all of that first with her character, and then didn't really come up with a way to introduce her character until later.
It could be, because Monogatari is really good at taking pretty much like stereotypes and character archetypes, and then shattering those and building real characters on top of these. Like I mean, throughout Bakemonogatari, Senjogaru is referred to as a tsundere. And she's a tsundere, but then she becomes so much more than that. She becomes a real person. And that goes for almost all the characters. And I think Nadeko starts out as like just the good girl, like the boring girl for instance. And maybe he is. I think he is a genius, but maybe it's that level of Giga Brain where he planned it out from the start. But because this arc doesn't sell her that well, aside from her being, just a cute, quiet girl.
Now, I will say it does, in hindsight, knowing what comes afterwards, it does sow some seeds for a lot of the stuff that does come later, especially her having sort of this childhood crush on Koyomi.
Koyomi Oni-chan. It's like, oh, okay, I've seen this before.
It's funny because they've met each other before. I mean, Koyomi I think was like 6 years old when they first met, and like she's sort of jealous that he has these sisters that he can always, because she's an only child, and she's kind of jealous that he has these sisters that he can play with, and has all these has friends and all this stuff, and that's why she starts, "Can I call you Oni-chan? Like, can I be your little sister?"
And he's enabling her.
She is another loli. Just putting that out there.
And again, it's one of the things I appreciate this arc on rewatches because what comes later and builds on this arc just makes it so much more interesting.
Yeah, what comes afterwards sells this arc.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is like the first arc in Bake where you kind of thinking to yourself, like, because it's really straightforward. Like Nadeko is like suffering from this condition for some reason, that she has these like snake scales on her, and Koyomi and Kanbaru are like trying to help her, and then they realize there's like a spirit, like a curse that was cast on her, so they try and help her, and they lift the curse, and it's like over. But then the question that...
Also something that's alluded to for later.
Yeah, and the brilliant thing about it, because, like, and they don't talk about it, but then you're sort of left to wonder, did really Nadeko do anything in this arc? And it's like, not really. She's sort of like...
because, like, without intervention from Koyomi, she'd probably be dead.
Yeah, she'd probably be dead, and I love it that by the end of this arc, like at the beginning she's like Koyomi Oni-chan, and then by the end she says it more confidently, I guess.
Yeah. And it's funny because Meme even says that like the little like ritual she's doing at the shrine to killing snakes is the right idea. Like it's a way to lift the curse, but she's not strong enough to do it on her own.
Yeah. Because it's again, this arc is so much more interesting to think about after you've watched more parts of the show, but it's really interesting to see all these seeds being sown early on.
It's another thing, like, again, rewatching, you see some other things, because it's almost like Meme is trying to tell Koyomi, like, you shouldn't be altruistic all the time, because that's what that whole line about no one can save you can only save yourself. Like, it's not always advantageous to be altruistic 100% of the time, but occasionally, and with Nadeko, sometimes you have to be altruistic. You have to go and help somebody.
Or should you? Because it's interesting. I mean, throughout the season we see,
but that's for later in the time.
That's for later. Yeah. But it's really interesting to see how Aragi just throws himself at problems, just like he does in this final arc of Bake at Tsubasa Cat. Bam! Nice segue, am I right? Woo!
Nice segue. You didn't even talk about how sexualized Nadeko was in this arc.
I try not to mention that.
But yeah, so into the final story arc, we have Tsubasa Cat, which is the longest story arc in Bakemonogatari. It is episodes 11 through 15. As I mentioned before, the final 3 episodes of this arc were not broadcast on television. I don't know why. I don't know why they ever did it like that. But
I guess they just, because by seasons it's always like 12 to 13 episodes. Maybe, I don't know. We can only speculate. Maybe there's like an interview somewhere about that. Maybe.
I'd be interested to find out exactly why it is the way it is. But anyway, the OP in this is Sugar Sweet Nightmare, easy for me to say, by Yui Horie, who is the voice actor for Tsubasa Hanakawa. I just want to say, I talk to people all the time about Monogatari OPs because, there's a lot to talk about with Monogatari OPs. This one is almost never brought up in a list of like top 5 or top 10 Monogatari OPs. And I don't know why, because it's really, really good.
Yeah, it's a good opening. It's not my favorite, but it's good. It's.
I love how it intercuts between like actual live action, like real world photography and
animation. Yeah.
And how it like blends those two together. I really like the visual aesthetic of this OP. I love the song too because I love Yui Horie's voice.
I agree, but I think this is the weakest of her songs in the entire show. Not in a bad way. I think I like the others way better.
Oh, for sure. I just wanted to point out that like I feel like it's a very underrated OP even within the Monogatari fandom.
Yeah.
So Natai, what happens in this arc? Because a lot of stuff happens.
So it's very interesting because, like, so again, the last three episodes were aired later, but it is interesting how the first episode of this arc is pretty much a recap. It's a recap for something that we haven't seen, obviously, but we'll delve into later on, which is Golden Week. Apparently during Golden Week, which happened, and that happened between the events of whatever happened back when Aragi became a vampire for the first time, and so between that and Bake, they came across this apparition that turned Hanekawa into a cat girl, and it's great, and I love it, and I will
Especially
not be
when
judged.
she wears pajamas, because fuck, that's sexy.
Fuck, man.
I have never been more turned on by pajamas in my life.
So the whole thing is, the long and short of it is pretty much is how Hanekawa turned into this like cat girl that is the manifestation of her stress. And during Golden Week, that stress happened because things that occurred in her home, and the way that she was taught was Shinobu actually got her and attacked her and drained her and weakened that apparition. And till now, it was all well and good, but now there's a chance she's back. But then, right before we can get into that, we delve into a different episode that's all about Itagi and Koyomi going on a date. And it's one of the most magical episodes in the entire show. And I love it.
Yes, for sure. That date is something else. I like even
and
how
their trip to the date.
Yeah, I like how Hitagi is like trying to find the right phrasing to ask him out on a date. And she starts with "we're going on a date," and it's like, no, that's not quite right. And then she goes through like 3 or 4 different variations of it. It's like, we're going on a date. It's like, you chose the same fucking one.
And that comes back at the end of the date, and I love how that shows her like trying to be better and better herself for the sake of Araragi, because by the end of the date, it's this wonderful show of her like sharing with him one of her most like intimate things she loves, and that's going out to this certain spot and looking at the stars. And it goes back to the ED, which is pretty much about her talking about seeing the stars together, and it's beautiful. I love it. And
yes,
I love how by the end of it she's like, we need to kiss. Oh wait, should we kiss? And she's again looking for the right words to share her feelings with him, because he is having a hard time doing it. But it's so wonderful to see her grow like that. This is my favorite aspect of Bake. Honestly.
Also, like relating it to someone who had been like sexually assaulted, like I can imagine that being intimate with someone after that would be difficult.
And she even says it. She's like, "You're gonna have to
bear with me, because
bear with me." Yeah,
being intimate and kissing and touching is gonna be very difficult for me.
Yeah.
And Itagi's like, "Bring it on. I love you, girl."
Yeah, it's this wonderful show of just her. I love how she's like, "This is my treasure," and they just sit there stargazing together. It's like, I love it. It's one of the best episodes ever.
It certainly humanizes her for sure, because like as you say, like she's introduced as this kind of somewhat generic tsundere character, and then like as the show goes on, like you realize, no, she's just incredibly insecure about herself, and then you find out why she's so insecure, and then now that she has someone who's like accepting her for who she is and not like just how she looks, like she can lower that guard, like, because the whole thing is like both Hitagi and Koyomi are somewhat insecure characters, and together they're able to like lift that screen that they put up above them.
It's beautiful, dude. It is. It's beautiful.
And also that conversation, the short conversation that Koyomi has with Hitagi's father in the car, where he's saying like, "I know I haven't been a good father. I know I haven't been there for her when she needed me the most." And then, but he says to Koyomi, "I see how she talks about you, and I see how she is when she thinks about you, and like you're good for her."
That's such a good episode.
Which I not to spoil anything, but that's also going to come up later, far later in the series, when Koyomi is talking about what Hitagi means to him.
It's their relationship is like honestly the heart of this entire series, and it is. It's great. I love it. Also, I fucking love the moments in the car where sometimes they'll refer to as Senjo Gahara-san, and Hitagi is like, "Hey, father, I think he wants to ask you a question." It's like, Hitagi-san.
I also like how she's 100% like trying to arouse him in the back seat by rubbing his
dude,
leg.
I don't know what the fuck she was whispering to him back there, but it's like, okay. She's like, "Oh, you think Conroe is an erotic girl? Hold my beer."
Yeah. Let me whisper a lot of sweet nothings in your ear to get you hard.
I mean, hey, I'm down.
But anyway, after that episode with the date, by the way, if you just watch the broadcast version, that's where it ends.
That's the end. Yep. That's the end.
But that episode right after it, where they're having Koyomi and Hitagi are having that conversation at the bike rack at school. First of all, I want to say interesting directorial choice, because if you notice in that scene, Hitagi's hair changes color. It's black.
Yes, that's right.
In the light novels and in the Bakemonogatari manga, which is currently in serialization, that is her actual hair color, is black.
Oh, it wasn't purple?
It is not purple in the light novel or the manga. Well, I guess in the manga it kind of is, at least on the cover art. It tends to be like a dark shade of purple. But in the original light novel illustrations, her hair is black.
Interesting.
And it's the only time in the series you actually see her looking like she is in the light novels. Now, I don't know why they did this, but I can tell you that this conversation has one of the best fourth wall breaks in the history of anime.
Yes.
Where she's talking about being able to mimic Koyomi's voice, and he's like, "Well, how can you do that?" And he's like, "Because my voice actor is really good."
It's awesome. There's so many, like, it's like Monogatari as a whole is very referential. There's so many references to so many things. Some of the time these references go over my head, but that moment of her like just sort of and then proceeding to mimicking Koyomi is such a great moment. It's awesome.
Yeah. That's a great one of the great moments in this entire series. Again, I don't know what the directorial choice was, her being like this is the only time you see her as she appears in the light novel. One way I kind of like interpreting it, although I don't know if this is the actual point, is that it's this conversation isn't actually canon. Like it's not something that actually happens. Like, I don't know how else to describe that. Like, it's only going on in one of the two's heads.
Maybe, I don't know. I love it either way.
Yeah, I do too. I love that little moment.
But anyway.
Also, we get Hachikuji. Hachikuji comes back.
We get Hachikuji, and it's a great little conversation, and again, it sets up a lot of stuff for this arc and some arcs later.
Yeah, and they talk about Hachikuji and Koyomi talk about Araragi's relationship with Hanakawa.
Yeah.
And that they're really just friends, but Hachikuji thinks that they would make a good couple.
And it's funny because it's as you watch some, like when you watch some like parts of the series, and when you get to Kizu, you'd be thinking, she's sort of like positioned as like this main girl that he would end up with, right? But it's like, what happened that didn't turn out like that? And we delve into that later on, but it's interesting that she starts interjecting and commenting on the relationship this early on.
Yeah. I also find it funny because this is the first of many times going forward that Koyomi and Hachikuji will actually talk to each other as like adults, right? Like, you know, she's presented as an elementary school kid, like in fourth or fifth grade. At the absolute oldest, maybe even younger than that. And Koyomi talks to her the way you would never actually talk to a child. Like he uses like, I'm not even talking about the vaguely sexual stuff they talk about. I'm talking about like, they talk about very serious, grounded stuff. Like the nature of relationships and the nature of like friendships and so like stuff you wouldn't really even think to talk about a kid with. And it's because I think that he realizes that she died a long time ago, so she's really been around for like 18, 19, 20 years.
Yeah. And it's honestly great conversations. I love the dialogue between the two. I mean, aside from the just shenanigans they go through and just the bullshit they go through, and great writing.
Too many
That's
ras.
not my name.
Kamimashita. I stuttered. I love that running gag between the two as well. Throughout,
and they always go like it just goes and goes and goes and goes, and it goes to stupid directions, and I love it.
That's also going to come full circle by the time second season comes around.
For sure. But let's talk about Hanekawa again.
Yes.
Now that she's back and she's
what's the actual name of the oddity? I forget now.
Sawari cat.
The Sawari cat, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that. First of all, the character design is amazing. And also the way that Yui Horie changes her voice when she's in the Black Hanekawa mode. It's so good.
Not just adding the cat noises the Nyan to her sentences. Just her pitch is different and her mannerisms are different. And it's so cool to compare it to. It
is. You might without knowing better, you might think that they were voiced by two different people, but they're not. That's something also we'll get into later when Shinobu finally gets to talk. That she's voiced by one person, but like the vocal range is amazing.
Yeah.
Also that tongue twister though.
That tongue twister, I could never do that.
I also love how this is a thing with translation. So in the Japanese, she's doing a Japanese tongue twister. Written out, it wouldn't be a tongue twister in English. Every single translation I have seen for it does not even bother to translate what the actual tongue twister is. They just insert an English tongue twister. And I love the fact that they did that because if you actually tried to do that literally, this is one of those instances where I'm actually glad they did not literally translate something. For all the people out there that bitch and moan about translations not being literal, this is a really good example of one time you definitely don't want to be literal with your translation.
That's the point of a translation. Again, you're trying to translate what the characters are like saying, not literally, but what like the actual point of it. You're conveying what the meaning of the sentences.
Yeah, it's something that bugs me when people talk about literal translations. Like, yeah, sometimes I can get with you, but there's other times like this where you don't want a literal translation.
Agreed.
But yeah, that's really great. And then like this whole thing with the cat, like why the cat exists, like it's a manifestation of Hanekawa's stress. And then the first time this cat appeared, we find out that the cat appeared because of the stress she was having with her family.
Yeah.
And the fact that her family is particularly her father, they're not her actual parents.
I love that. Like, I should have wrote it down, but how does that work? Like, her father, like, how did that go? Like, her father married a different woman, and then her mother married a different man, and then they married each other. I don't even know. Something weird.
It's a really weird thing, and it's not really expanded on a lot in this.
The point is that they're not her biological parents.
No, and she's essentially an orphan, more or less. Yeah. I mean, she's an orphan without having parents dead. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a really strange situation that is expanded on later in Neko Black
and White.
Black and White, yes. I think it's really expanded on in Neko White.
Yeah, her situation definitely. Yeah,
and the fact that her father, in particular, her quote unquote father, is somewhat physically abusive to her.
Yeah,
and like it's alluded to before because you see her one of her appearances. She has a bandage on her cheek.
That's in the flashback to Golden Week. Yeah, and then And back then, again, the Sawari cat manifested as her stress to sort of and actually hurt her parents because the situation in her home caused her so much stress. But now, and that's like the whole exploration of this arc is like, why is she stressed out again? Is because of her feelings towards Araragi. And for the first 2 episodes of this like 3-parter, it's like the cat is like going along with them, and she is captured at some point by Oshino, but she's like, for the most part, she's like, she's not a threatening force, you could say. I mean, she's powerful, but she's not a threat as far as we could tell. But then by the end of this arc and the season, she reveals, "Nah, dummy, the reason she's so stressed out is because she loves you, but now..."
Yeah, she's been in love with you ever since you saved her life.
Yeah, Baka.
Yeah, and then like the solution that the cat has is that, well, let me just kill you, then I can be rid of this stress, because the source of this stress is gone.
And I love that whole exchange. We talked about this, like, not while recording, but we talked about this. But I love how his first instinct for a moment is because Black Hanekawa says, "Hey, either fall in love with my master, I mean Hanekawa, or die, and that will solve her problem." And for a moment, Aragi's like, maybe I will just die, and that will save her. But then he realizes, oh shit, I can't do that. Itagi will kill her.
Yeah. What happens when he has this realization? What happens?
A little someone is showing up finally after disappearing.
Who's been hidden in his shadow all along.
That's also a plot point that sort of is getting touched on later in the show, but how Shinobu is sort of disappeared, and Oshino kind of lets her go at that point because Oshino is leaving, apparently.
Yeah, Oshino is leaving.
He's not sticking around.
He what's the word I'm looking for? He alludes to this, way earlier than his actual departure. Like, hey, eventually I'm not going to be around, and you're going to have to figure some of this shit out yourself, Koyomi.
And he just waves goodbye without saying anything.
Yeah. But no, like, and the whole thing with Shinobu's disappearance, and Koyomi enlists all the other girls that he's met so far to help him try and find Shinobu, and she's been in his shadow all along, following him around, because it's another thing that it's telling you that these two characters, although we know very little about Shinobu at this point, these two characters are inexorably linked, and that just adds to the mystery. Like, how are they linked, and what does this mean going forward?
And what do they mean for each other? It's like,
And what do they mean to each other? And that's something that's going to be explored.
Literally, he says in like the last episode, at some point, it's like, if she dies tomorrow, I don't mind dying as well. It's like, whoa, what's the history between these two? It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and there's something there, and it just sets it up so perfectly for to be explored later.
But yeah, then Shinobu saves the day. She defeats Black Hanekawa, and she goes back. It's like, but it's the same solution. So the question comes up again. Well, will this last? I mean, she was back before. What's going to stop her from coming back again? And again. Like, is this going to be a recurring issue that we have to deal with until Hanekawa realizes that she can't have Koyomi? Yeah, it's like, because Hanekawa didn't really deal with her stress. I mean, Shinobu sort of helped her, but that doesn't solve the problem.
She's the type of character who very much internalizes all of her stress. And, like, it just bottles up and bottles up and bottles up, and then it just comes out all at once.
It's just great writing. I love it. Yeah. It's a fantastic
something else that I think is relatable, because I think there's a lot of people who are either like that, or you probably know someone like that who doesn't deal with their stress, head on. They bottle it up until it all just comes out all at once.
Yep. It's a fantastic arc. I love this arc.
And again, I'll go back to it over and over again. No one can save you. You can only save yourself.
Yep. And yeah, but then we get a little, just a short sort of moment of goodbye for all the girls, and Aragi saying goodbye to Oshino to some extent. They're going to the old high school, and he's not there. And oh my god, this, like, we listened to it, was it last night or 2 nights ago? That piece of music that plays at the end when they're like going into the school, it's I love that soundtrack so much, especially in that scene.
Yeah. But that's Bakemonogatari.
For now, that's the end of Bakemonogatari, yeah.
For now, yes. I can't remember exactly what I felt like when I first watched this all the way through back in 2015, but I can tell you this. I feel the same way. I felt the same way then that I did after rewatching it now. Can't wait for the next part.
Ooh, and it's gonna be quite a steamy part, am I right?
It is. Monogatari is it's a hell of a thing.
It's a hell of a thing.
It really, really is, and that's the only way I can describe it.
But that's for some other time.
That'll be next time. So, if you're out there listening to this and you want to watch along with us, especially if this is your first time through the Monogatari series, watch it along with us. Like I said, next time will be. It will be fun. Next time will be Nize Monogatari, and I'm sure we will have just as much fun talking about that as we did this one. So unless you have anything else, Natai?
Sorry, John.
Yeah, sorry, John.
We went on a few
over time
tangents
with this, but you knew it was going to be that way. I'm sorry, though. But thank you all out there for dropping in to listen to us gush about the Monogatari series. Check the description below to find links to Anime Club, After Dark on Twitch, on social media, and on Discord. Check out our merch store and our affiliate links as well. Any purchases you make there do really help us out. With that, I've been your host, Alex, and I will see you next time. Say goodnight, Natai.
Tsundere service.
Tsundere service. Hey, Natai, I want you to know something.
Okay.
I don't know everything, but I know what I know.
God damn it.